On this edition of Somerville Neighborhood News, we look at opioid addiction in Somerville, its causes and its effects. And we'll discuss what's being done with Patty Contente and Chief David Fallon of the Somerville Police Department. Hello, and welcome to this edition of Somerville Neighborhood News. Today is Tuesday, January 12, 2016. I'm News Director Heather Avison. Opioid addiction is affecting cities and towns throughout the country. And here in Massachusetts, the Baker administration has filed legislation that would give medical personnel more power to intervene with patients suffering from addiction, tighten regulations around prescribing addictive opioids, and increase community education on substance abuse. Somerville has not been immune to the problem. Tonight, we're going to look at the issue of opioid abuse and addiction with Chief of Police David Fallon and Patty Content from the Community Outreach and Harm Reduction Department here in Somerville. Thank you both for joining me tonight.
Thank you.
In May, SNN reporter Yu Xiaoyun brought us a three-part series on opioids in Somerville. Part one of the series gives us an overview of the issue.
Recently, we've seen a spike in ODs.
According to the Somerville Police Department, in 2014, overdoses from heroin and other opioids like oxycodone were almost 4 times the number in 2013. That year, there were 20 heroin overdoses, 3 of them fatal. In 2014, the number of overdoses, mostly from heroin, jumped to 76. 13 were fatal. During just the first 3 months of this year, the city has already seen 20 overdoses. 6 of them fatal.
One's too many. I mean, you think about the loss of potential to the community, how that affects the family, the immediate family. I mean, it's devastating. It's a tragedy. We've seen deaths from people in their 30s or 20s up to people at 60 that we believe is caused due to opioids.
According to the police, most of the overdose victims are male, 80%, and most are between the ages of 20 and 34. 95% of them are white.
Anybody can get involved in it, whether you come from, a poverty-stricken family to the most wealthy family. I mean, it goes from, it's in our colleges and it's in our prisons.
But while overdoses, arrests, and calls about used needles do come from across the city, overdoses are mostly concentrated in certain areas, like the Lower Broadway neighborhood, Union Square area, but also Davis Square. Most arrests are made in the Lower Broadway neighborhood and the Home Depot parking lot. But police have also picked up dealers in places like the bathroom of the Davis Square Starbucks. Chief Fallon says it will take more than arrests to deal with the epidemic.
We're training our office how to deal with people with opioid addiction issues, how to deal with people in mental health crisis. So we're realizing some of that. We're not going to arrest our way out. So we want to give the officers the tools on the street to step away from arrest and say, how can I get this person that's addicted to opioid, at risk of ODing, at risk of death, into the system that's going to help him get a bed, help him get treatment, help his family understand the issue, help them help the person get treatment. So that's what we're moving towards in Somerville.
And they will have to move fast to keep up with what appears to be an increasing flow of drugs.
So we're seeing these everywhere, even in the gutters, on sidewalks. We get calls all the time for pick up hypodermic needles.
Why? Why is there an increase? I mean, is heroin more potent today? Is there different cutting agents that they're using, such as fentanyl is often bandied around, and we're working with the state and the state labs to confirm that. Life in general, is it harder today? Are people more anxious in their lives and turning to drugs to help cope with that? Is it starting with prescription drugs that can be expensive, and then moving on beyond that? I mean, I think you have to really approach the problem from a lot of different angles, just because there's really that one answer of why.
Why the increase here and across the country? We have the same question. And what is the city and the community doing to fight back? We will continue to explore the issue in the next newscast.
In the second story, individuals and families share their stories of addiction, loss, and recovery.
This is usually put inside of a gym bag.
In a kid's room.
In a kid's room, you find a gym bag. And inside, that's where they keep, and again, once again, these are not drugs. They're just aspirins, Tylenols. They end up with the pills in it.
Julie Walker and other SOA members hold workshops to teach parents about possible drug hiding spots. They hope the tragedies that happen to them won't repeat on others.
It closes exactly the way it is. Addiction has touched my life through my son. He was incarcerated for a long time and had a child through with a girl that was also addicted to heroin, which in turn caused the child to be addicted to heroin.
It's just the way it is.
Growing up in Somerville our entire lives, I'm pretty sure that my son suffered anxiety issues and he had learning disabilities. And I think that with my lack of not wanting to put him on any kind of medication while he was going through school, he started to self-medicate himself.
I don't know, it kind of crept up on me, I guess. Grew up in the projects, I always idolized the wrong people. I wanted to be like them guys. Next thing I know, just landed on my lap and I couldn't turn around. I was stuck. But I didn't start using until my later years, until I was about 25. And then I just went on a run from hell and it just ruined my life. There was no detoxes for me. There was no nothing. I didn't have health insurance. So you can't get into a detox without health insurance. You can get a free bed, but they're far and few between. So I just ran till the wheels fell off. And I ended up in prison, you know.
Then Jimmy met Matt, also a former addict. Now he works for a treatment center and writes poetry to raise awareness about addiction.
Raising my voice to the nation. Inspiration for every addict getting high in the basement, a kid trying to get clean as a detox patient, that they can say, I am one of the ones that made it.
Matt helped Jimmy get into a recovery program.
I have a similar, start to my drug use as Jimmy, where, I've always had the hardest time trying to fit in, and I always fit in with the wrong people. And when I first started using, which I'm sure same goes with you, is there was nobody talked about what an Oxycontin would do. There was no, hey, this little pill's gonna destroy your life and take absolutely everything from you. It takes your soul, it takes your family, it takes your friends. I'm Matthew Gaynor, and you will remember the name. I'm not anonymous. I remember I went in the bathroom, I looked in the mirror, and I was, a shadow of myself. Like I couldn't even tell you who was looking back. I didn't have anybody to turn to, I had no friends, I had no family, and I just had enough. Like I knew if I continued this path, I wasn't gonna make it. So I attempted to get clean for the umpteenth time, but fortunately for the last time I got clean, it worked.
This is my son, Frank.
Joanne Rivicchio, another member of SOA, lost her son 6 years ago.
My son actually worked for the U.S. Post Office, making $52,000 a year. And one day he had a motorcycle accident in Woburn, and that was the end. That was the beginning of the end. For 10 years he fought an addiction with Oxycontin. The Mass General doctor put him on that, which I don't understand, because Oxycontin, even though he had severe injuries, the Oxycontin was generally made for people that were dying of cancer, to help them with their pain. Not to be given to someone that just had an accident. What's wrong with even Percocets or anything that was, less the strength of Oxycontin. He struggled. 2 days before my son died, he cried to me and he said, "Ma, I don't want to die." But he was in the process of getting the employee assistance program in the post office to help him. But the person that he spoke to in confidence, that was a friend, he said, "Oh, I think I'm going to be running for union representative." And out of the mouth of this person, without even thinking about what you're saying, he said, "Who would want to vote for a junkie?" And that's when everything spiraled and went downhill for him.
A lot of us have checkered past, and we've all made mistakes in life, but the fact is we can turn our lives around and make something of ourselves. We're not just a junkie.
Oh, I went back to school. I got my GED, I got my HVAC certificate, I'm certified, and here I am today, clean and sober.
Somerville Overcoming Addiction lobbies officials, does trainings, holds vigils, and organizes other events to raise awareness and to fight the heroin and opioid epidemic. But they are not the only ones fighting back. In my next segment, I'll take a look at some of the other efforts around the city. For Somerville Neighborhood News, I'm Yu Xiaoyuan.
What can be done here in Somerville to fight the problem? That's the subject of the third story in our series.
In the Morse Kelly Playground, a plaque commemorates the spot where a 16-year-old died of an OxyContin overdose 20 years ago.
We felt at the time that, this death, while tragic, might at least lead to people changing their behavior and realizing the problems with opiates. And unfortunately, it was just the first of many deaths to happen. And it's a problem that's happened in the early to mid 1990s, and it is still a problem today.
As a Somerville native, Alderman Matt McLaughlin witnessed many overdose deaths while growing up.
And I feel like a lot of kids kind of lost hope. The dreams they had when they were young got diminished and shrunk a little bit. And when it came time to face reality, people weren't ready for that. And it was a lot easier to stay in this drug world than it was to, pull it together and, go to college and all these things.
What upsets McLaughlin even more is the lack of funding for inpatient rehab programs in the city.
One of the things that killed me most of anything is in 2008, around that time period, at the height of our previous opiate epidemic, the Somerville Hospital closed their rehab center. The clear thing we need is just more resources, more time and money allocated towards getting people into treatment.
Patty Contenti from the city's Trauma Response Network is also concerned.
There is definitely a lack of beds for the number of people who are suffering from addiction, meet that diagnostic criteria. There really just aren't enough inpatient beds. But what more is concerning is there is no continuum of treatment. But there are, I think that one of the main things that we are trying to do in Somerville and at a community level is really work in partnership with community groups. There are many. There's Somerville Overcoming Addiction is a very active community group, and they are willing to partner and volunteer and assist in many ways. So we're trying to look at training resources. We're considering recovery coaching. How can we bring that resource as a way to provide alternative community supports while folks are waiting for those treatment beds and longer-term treatment.
Item 10 is a resolution submitted by Alderman McLaughlin.
The Board of Aldermen are taking action. On May 14th, the board passed a resolution encouraging police to help addicts, not to arrest them.
I hope Somerville could take a page out of Gloucester. And the city of Gloucester is come out basically saying that if you come to the police station and ask for help with the substance abuse problem, they will help you, they won't arrest you. They said that any addict who comes to the police headquarters will get, quote, an angel to walk them down the road toward detox recovery.
A long time, they have a quarry, they can't get a job, they're back in this terrible cycle. If we can stop that before it starts by treating people, instead of putting people away in prison where they don't belong and they only get worse and we only make criminals out of people, that is the productive route.
The city and the police department are moving in the same direction. According to Contenti, Somerville recently hired a substance abuse counselor to work at the police station.
The goal will be to ensure that family members have information on resources to support themselves and gain knowledge about how to support their loved one in recovery, and then also to reach out those impacted by addiction to offer opportunities for support to engage in treatment and resources that will help them to recover.
The new initiatives will likely help, but will they be enough?
It's a big cycle. There's prevention, stopping people before they start. There's helping people when they need the help. And then there's helping people after the fact, because once you're addicted, you know, you're a recovering addict for the rest of your life. Even if you go years without using, the drug has such a hard hold on you that, you know, you're considered an addict forever. So we really need beginning, middle, and end treatment to this issue.
Somerville is fighting back as the other families across the nation do. But these are only small steps in the long-term battle. We'll keep an eye on the local efforts. For Somerville Neighborhood News, I'm Yu Xiaoyuan.
Thank you again for joining us, Chief Fallon, Patty Content. I want to start with the statistics that we saw there. Overdoses have been going up, and yet the statistics that we see for Somerville are actually much lower than surrounding cities like Revere and Everett. To what do you attribute that?
You know, I think it's really the collaborative approach that Somerville takes as a city to address the issue that helps keep our numbers down. But, you know, one death to heroin overdose is too many. And, you know, responding as a patrolman myself, you know, back a few days now, you know, back in time when I was a patrolman, you know, when you see one, you realize the effect that it has, the immediate effect that it has on the family and the extended family. And I think Somerville really strive to work with all the community groups to really, you know, do as much outreach as we can in an effort to keep, you know, our numbers as low as possible.
Do you think the density in Somerville has anything to do with it? I mean, people are very
Sure.
close
Yeah.
as neighbors, very close to each other where they live. Do people keep an eye out for each other?
I think they do. I think Somerville still has that neighborhood feel, and everybody's looking out for each other and watching each other's children. And even as children grow older, I don't think. And Somerville people aren't afraid to say what they think sometimes, and I think that helps. And have that straight talk and that straight dialogue about issues and take ownership
And
of
Patty,
it.
that brings in your work with the police department. You were under City Hall. Now you've moved over to the police department to create a greater collaboration with them when cases do come before the police.
Right.
Can you tell us about that change and how that's working?
Sure. So I've been with the city for about 8 years and have been based with Health and Human Services. And my role there was in the Office of Prevention, doing more prevention work, community education around mental health and substance abuse. And what we found over the years was that our population was changing. So when you ask what's the difference, unfortunately, about a decade ago, Somerville did have a high incident of overdoses of young people due to OxyContin at the time, mixing substances, as well as suicide. And so I think, unfortunately, out of that tragedy, the city learned a lot. And so a lot of efforts were put in for youth development programs and prevention within the schools. And I think that has also contributed to the decline in use and hence in overdose. But so as I progressed, part of my role was to do surveillance. So I was tracking 911 data information, which was basically police and fire calls for service, and tracking for specifically to see substance use and overdose as well as suicide. And we noticed that the trends were really down, and then 2011 was our first indication that there was a beginning spike. We lost 3 individuals in their mid-20s at that point to heroin overdose. And so we started to look at who is our population most at risk, and it was really, young adults. And this was confirmed by hospital data from Cambridge Health Alliance that our high-risk population were males, 20 to 29-year-olds. I had been working with the police department on a number of grants related to jail diversion, more related to mental health. But we saw this opportunity to look at the overlap between substance use and mental health. And so we decided that it would be more efficient and effective to move me over to the police department, focus more on community outreach and harm reduction for more a comprehensive approach, looking not only at the addiction issues, but also quality of life, mental health issues as well. And so we're asking officers, because they're oftentimes a key point of contact for individuals early on in the system. So one of the things we learned that helped us to kind of formulate this concept was just looking at domestic violence issues as well, just general calls for service that the department gets.
And where they overlap, where you've got.
And we found that one of the domestic violence calls, there was an overdose that occurred recently, but that individual had been identified in a domestic case years before and actually had talked about substance use. And so looking at those opportunities to provide, outreach maybe at an earlier intervention point before the crisis happens. So I've been over there since the start of December and really getting up and rolling. We're getting a lot of referrals from officers, reaching out to families as well as individuals, and trying to not only look at kind of the immediate emergency need, but also once someone comes back from detox, as they're coming back to the community, we want to be a point of contact for them to feel like they can kind of talk through where they want to be.
Talk about that, the continuum of care that
Sure.
you mentioned. I want to ask you about, what do you hear from the officers as this progresses and you become more collaborative? It sounds like they're really stepping up to the plate. And as you say, having been an officer out in the field, once you see it,
yeah.
it really affects you.
Patty's done a great job at the police department and really taking things in incremental steps. So we really started, not to say small, but kind of, not to say easy either, but we started with mental health first aid training, which all the officers received was 8 hours, and that was expanded upon, so a certain percentage of the officers in the police department caught 40 hours of training in crisis intervention training. And I think, as a chief, we started to talk to the officers and talk about, whether you got 20 years on the job or 2 years on the job, remember what you got into policing for. And you got into policing to help people. And if someone is suffering from an opioid disease, you can really play a big role as a police officer in helping that person. So I think a lot of the guys, and I'd say all the guys, and men and women of some police department, has brought into that concept that if someone's suffering from the disease of addiction, whatever inflection point we can get into them and get them to the right resources, it's part of our jobs to do that.
And there is the Gloucester model that's out there.
Sure. Yep.
sort of
Parry.
Directing people towards rehabilitation rather than criminal justice system. How is that working for you? And do you work with local departments?
Yeah, I think we took a lot from the Gloucester model, and very intrigued of how they advertised what they were doing and things like that. But some of them, for a long time, I think if you go back to 2014, 78% around that number of cases that involved just possession only, some of possession narcotics only, was resolved without arrest. But I think what's important about the core program is that it utilizes to the maximum capacity the resources that are already in place. And I think that when you do that, I think you're really providing the best service. So what it really does is says, look, here's what we have, here's what's available to us, and here's what's available to people suffering with addiction. Let's utilize that to the maximum capacity and provide people, with guidance on how to get access to those resources that are available.
And when they do come back, they get the resources that they might need immediately.
Sure, yep.
But as you talk about the long term, the follow-up,
Right.
how is your department working on that?
Right. So if you look at any chronic health condition, and addiction is a chronic health condition, so it's not any different than diabetes or heart disease. And what often is required and what people often kind of don't think about is that relapse is part of that disease. And so if you look at statistics related to relapse rates for diabetes, addiction, heart disease, you'll see that addiction relapse, which we often think about occurs much more frequently, is really not that different. It's about at the same percentage as other chronic health issues. And so that kind of brings us to what are we missing here? So people go to detox, they get sober, they start their recovery, maybe they go to a 60-day program, maybe they go to a 90-day program. But the misconception is that, they're done, they're fixed. And I think that what we're trying to support people with is that life change and that process. And so meeting people where they're at, we're really looking at, all right, so you go to therapy, you may have medication-assisted treatment. What else are you doing? We're looking at, we have a pilot program right now with the Pine Street Inn. It's a educational employment program and transitional employment. And we refer people to there because that's part of life, right? Getting back into the workforce, getting a job.
To stay
Right,
healthy, whether it's heart
structure.
disease or diabetes, to stay on top of your sugar numbers,
Yeah.
or addiction, you have to have a reason to do
Yeah.
that.
Sure.
Yeah, and so really promoting as well other things that people can do without a lot of cost, like meditation and relaxation, music. Again, getting back to what were things that you really loved, were interested in, that were important to you, and can give you that kind of hope and feel like you're of value again, and you're part of society and community, and have a role.
So taking that sort of the other side of it, and just going back for a minute to before the addiction begins, what are the factors, what can we do here in Somerville as residents to support those who might be at risk of becoming addicted or might not even be aware of it as our kids grow up?
It's the school department, it's the health department, it's the Department of Public Works, and everybody being involved in the youth of our city's lives. And I know the city has recently made an investment, a big investment in teen empowerment. And I came up through the ranks of Somerville Police Department working with teen empowerment and saw all the good work they did. And it's not always easy working with kids that are dropped out of school or trying marijuana. Some people want to look beyond that, but groups like teen empowerment don't. They say, look, these are let's get them before you make a bad decision. Teach them a good decision-making model and give them some confidence. And I think it goes a long way.
Yeah, I agree. I think that unfortunately, the crisis proves that no one is immune. It doesn't have anything to do with socioeconomic background or family history. This is something that anybody could be at risk of. And I think what we see when we look, pre-addiction, if you look at case analysis, what you'll see is oftentimes there's some anxiety issues, some possible, oftentimes learning issues are part of the picture. Not always, but oftentimes. And so it's really around how do you reduce stigma in getting help. So oftentimes people
whether it's addiction or
no matter what
any
it
other
is. Yeah.
mental health issue
Yeah.
that you might have or emotional issue that you might
Yeah.
have, so that you don't go down that road.
Right. And everyone right now is saying, should I be talking to my child about heroin use? No, that's not relevant for most of us, right? Hopefully. So, if you're talking about 10-year-olds and, younger children, it's really about how do you make good choices, as the chief mentioned. What are your life skills? I often say, talk to your kids, use natural opportunities. If they're taking vitamins, well, why can't those gummy vitamins? I like them too. But you can only take 2. There's a reason for that. So responsibility. We also do a couple of we're raising awareness around take-back days, proper disposal of prescription medicines, because we know that this crisis started with prescription meds. So just cleaning out your medicine cabinet. The research tells us that 1 in 4 kids who access substances are doing it through their family's medicine cabinets or a friend or family member, their excess medication that they didn't need to use for surgery. So there's a kiosk at the department. It's open 24/7. It's like mailing a letter. You walk in there, no questions asked. You just remove your personal information, you put it in the box, and it's not only, it improves environmental safety, good for water and ground, but it also keeps your kids safe as well.
Chief Fallon, Patty Content, thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining us tonight. I think people learned a lot, and thank you for the good work that you do for the people of Somerville.
Great.
If you, a family member, or a friend is struggling with opioid addiction, you can contact the Massachusetts Substance Abuse Helpline at 800-327-5050 or www.helpline-online.com. Here in Somerville, you can call the Community Outreach and Harm Reduction Office at 617-625-6600, extension 728. Both resources offer free, confidential help. That's our newscast for tonight. We'll be back on January 26th at 7 p.m. on Channel 3. Check out all of our news stories at somervilleneighborhoodnews.org. You can find us on Facebook, Scat TV SNN, Twitter, @ScatTVSNN, or you can call us at 617-628-8826 or email us at news@scattvsomerville.org. I'm Heather Avison. Thanks for joining us. Good night.